one of the reasons I selected the name for this seminar, Classical Science, New Fears, Islamic Eschatology, and Technological Apocalypse in an Age of AI, is primarily because I was working at the Archives of Impossible, which is uh, a center based at Rice University, the Woodson Center. And they are primarily the archives about paranormal, UFOs, aliens, all those uh, different creatures that some would agree and some would say as not existing at all. Uh, but at the same time, when I was working within those archives, I came across different letters, and that is a collection of scribal letters. And I was working on different eschatological themes within those letters. And one of the things I noticed was that the language and the jargon that was primarily coming within those letters about apocalypse, about eschatology, was primarily derived from theology itself. That is why I felt that despite the fact that anyone who was writing that letter was religious or was not, his subconscious was developing all that jargon that is primarily coming from the Abrahamic tradition. That I would assume, as most of those letters were from USA. So definitely, you see a lot of Christian literature coming in, a lot of uh, Jewish literature coming in, and obviously because all these two streams then align together, I also assume that it's the Islamic eschatological literature as well that also is projected within that literature. And that is why we named this Classical Science New Fears, because I feel like despite all the fact, uh, all these things eventually come down to all this historical process that we as humanity have evolved over time. Defining AI for the start is a very difficult job because like people have different definitions. But like in present time, I would say that I'm defining AI as LLMs, which are large language models, primarily the systems that we as users usually use. For example, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, anything. Uh, And the era of AI at large, why do I call it? It's highly debatable, though. Some would say that we are progressing towards that era. We are not over there yet. But I would say that uh, uh, the period in which AI becomes the chief site onto which the society not only project their judgments and their limits, that is uh, the time that would we could call as an era of AI. Maybe we are not there yet, but uh, as the technologists would say, hopefully we are moving towards that. So definitely, while we are discussing this, we'll keep some of the futuristic ends in our mind. Uh, Before we go towards the classical science, two important things. Firstly, uh, this lecture is primarily my research, so I'm not going to discuss each and every facet of AI and all different discourses that are happening within this field. Very contemporary, very relatable, but at the same time, a lot of literature. So I'll skip some of the things and I'll touch upon few. Secondly, I'm not here to predict things, so definitely no predictions about the end time days, no prediction when Jesus is going to come back, and no prediction about whether we are very close to the apocalypse or not. I'll try to keep it very scholarly. Uh, uh, so yeah. Um, as for the etymology of the word itself, apocalypse, I've primarily taken the Greek word apocalypsis, which is unveiling, which is also taken in the context of revelation, also taken in the context of lifting of a veil. So I feel like apocalypse is definitely a process of whereby you understand different events that are happening that could lead to end times. But at the same time, all those events are unveiling in themselves. They are a revelation. They are very new. They lift a veil on all those things that have been taught uh, to us through literatures, uh, religious and secular at the same time. And then we move towards that era. So, uh, just I've taken up some of the pictures of what I feel like the apocalypse or the literature could come from. Revelation, definitely Bible. Then we've got Quran, Hadith, Ijma. Like those are the three primary categories of where you get the Islamic literature from. And I have like for the fun taken up 1984 George Orwell too, because I feel like Orwell's idea, if some of you have read, I hope so, is primarily about a world whereby people are uh, in a very dystopian state, and some would call it very apocalyptic in nature because humans are sort of very reduced uh, and very controlled and very dominated by different structures over there. So, yeah. Uh, Two apocalypses, one arc. This is the theme I've chosen for this slide, and primarily because I feel like the religious apocalypses are not a single event but a long sequence, and they have different gaps in between. And this is something I'll also discuss later on too. Uh, so there are minor signs, and when we take up Islamic apocalypse, there is the deceiver, which is the Antichrist in Bible, or the Dajjal in Muslims literature, and then there is return of Jesus or Hazrat Isa, and then there is cosmic renewal at the end of the day. Uh, for this lecture, I have taken up three different secular apocalypses. This is something I've been working on and developing up for now. One of them is the climate apocalypse, or ecological apocalypse, as we could say, the nuclear apocalypse, and AI and tech apocalypse, the singularity. Ecological apocalypse has been debated a lot, and there are like different people who are climate change deniers. Some would say it's very imminent, some would say it is not. Uh, Differs from place to place. But from the area I come from, Lahore, or South Asia in particular, we feel a lot of climate change happening because of the smoke. People just cannot breathe in. So definitely a problem starting from New Delhi, which is India, and going on and stretching towards Lahore, especially during winters. So definitely an imminent threat to humanity because air is something we all want to breathe in. Nuclear apocalypse, very important, and I feel like in terms of literary uh, context, it becomes very, very relevant, especially during the Cold War. And the Europeans, the Americans, the people within the Britain felt that as if it was something that could lead towards the end of the world because USSR and the Western powers were colliding together. And it was an era of extreme stimulations. And the world had already seen Hiroshima and Nagasaki happening in Japan. So I feel like when you come across this theme of nuclear apocalypse, you see a lot of literature coming on, especially on the Western side. So people were writing a lot about how it's imminent, how it could happen, and how it could mark the end of the coming of the Jesus. So, like the headlines literally read, Jesus is coming. And some felt it was Armageddon, which is the last battle. So they felt that it could happen. Uh, Thankfully, we get past that, but wars are still happening. Uh, yeah. And AI or tech apocalypse, this is the terminology I'm using for this is the singularity, something we'll expound on later on. So I have taken up Victor Turner and his book, The Ritual Process, Structure and Entire Structure, to explain the liminality, what I say. So, liminality uh, is the in between of a passage, what we do not know or what we know, something in between. Turner has used it to explain different rites of passages or ritual process. I feel like the apocalyptic literature at large within both Christian and Muslim terms is very liminal at times because you get all those major signs coming in at the end, but there are things which are very, very liminal. You just do not know what's going to happen in between. Therefore, all of uh, the people who predict about things are mostly wrong because they feel like it's going to come, but it does not. So I feel like the liminal process is ongoing, and therefore there is a lot of space in between to not only derive different metaphors of what could happen, and at the same time uh, think about different things that are an imminent threat to humanity at large. Uh, I have also taken up William James here. William James is, as you all know, uh, an important figure in terms of mysticism, and his book, the religious experience, the varieties of religious experiences. And I've taken up one of the religious experiences that he has categorized, which is ineffability. So for James, it's the subject of it, and this is where I'm quoting him. The subject of it immediately says that it defies expression, that no adequate report of its contents can be given in words. It follows from this that its quality must be directly experienced. It cannot be imparted or transferred to others. So ineffability for him is that one has to experience it, and even if one tries to project it or impart it to others, it's really difficult. And in terms of religious literature, it's very important because we see prophets, we see books imparting different knowledge, but most of that knowledge is at times experienced by them, as I would say, but they try their best to impart it. But has it been transferred? That is very debatable. So for William James, that's ineffability. And I feel like most of the apocalyptic literature at times could be ineffable. Uh, in terms of Islamic literature, one of the important categorical points is definitely the mirage or the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad, as Muslims would say. Uh, and within that night journey, you get a lot of apocalyptic literature, and especially about things that are going to happen at the end times. For example, hell, heaven, all those things. The Prophet might have experienced that, uh, but did he impart everything that he saw? Highly debatable. Therefore, now we are moving towards the classical science, keeping in mind that there is a lot of liminality that could happen in between. But for the sake of this session, we'll take up some of the classical science that are part of the Muslim Islamic literature. Uh, and I have taken up the eschatology of the jargon. So there are different words that are used for this. For the last day, at least, dead. Yawmuddin, day of judgment, when everyone would come back and then they would be judged by God. But that is the last day, or the end times. The signs of the hour. Uh, Importantly, like most of the apocalypses, Islamic apocalypse is divided into distant, intermediate, and imminent signs. This is the Western terminologies I'm taking in. Uh, so, minor signs could be anything from a very dystopian world, and major signs could be anything from the coming back of the Jesus or the coming back of the Antichrist. So all of the things that are happening now could be called as minor signs because we're just like, okay, we're moving towards the major signs, but major signs are yet to come. This is mostly consensus within the scholars that we have to see the major signs for now. Though they have been debating a lot about the Arabs, because one of the hadith would say that the Arabs would compete with each other on the size or the buildings. And some would say that it's very, very notable that the Arabs are, because you see, Burj Khalifa is based in Arabia, which is like UAE, and the Saudis are also trying to build something I've not noticed in the West. So the people over here, even in USA, they're like, we need much more air. The buildings could like stretch on, but a notable thing. And secondly, things like people competing over money, all those things could be called as like the minor signs, but the major have yet to come. So where I'm taking this literature from three main sources. Obviously, the Quran, the Hadith literature, and thirdly, the Ijma. Ijma is going to be the consensus of the scholars, and we are taking up only the classical ones for now. Uh, and some of the other signs could be climatic and cosmetic disturbances. Now, Quran would also like refer to this. For example, the smoke of the sun coming on from the west and the earthquakes. So this has an uncanny resonance with the ecological apocalypse that we just talked about. But the major signs are going to be the Dabatul Earth, which is the beast of the earth. It would emerge from the Mount of Safa as one of the final signs. Yajuj Majuj, or the Gog and the Magog, uh, which would break loose and would swarm. Uh, just for the fun, in Pakistan, mostly the people felt that the Chinese were the Yajuj and Majuj because of the separation of the Great Wall uh, that was there, or that was told to them that, yeah, this is the Great Wall. Because, like, primarily within the literature, it has been stated that the Yajuj and Majuj have been captured up and they're sort of licking up a wall, a great one. And the end times come up, they'll just like swarm the earth and they'll drink up seas. The Mahdi, the guided one, is from the lineage of the Prophet himself, uh, and then definitely Isa ibn Maryam. So for most of the Muslims, the Jesus or Hazrat Isa never died on the cross. He lives until now and is living in heavens and would come back when the end times are very, very near. And Jesus would then fight up with the Antichrist, which is the Dajjal. So, uh, a a difference in definitely Christian and Muslim opinion. But nonetheless, we are all waiting for Jesus. Al-Dajjal, same thing. Interestingly, I've taken up Suyuti's chronology for this. So anyone who knows about Suyuti, a very well-known scholar, and I have taken up Larry Poston. He has translated and written up this book, The Second Coming of Isa, an exploration of Islamic perennialism. Uh, and he has given four steps: the renewal, the Mahdi, Al Dajjal, and Isa descends. And that is how the translation goes on. I'm taking up uh, this a period of intermediate length, but which is likely 1,000 years, which has not been proved. This is something I'm adding over here because, like, Suyuti felt that first 1,000 years were really, really important for Islamic apocalypse. That is what he says. But which is likely 1,000 years during which both a trial, which is fitna, and renewal, which is that Mujaddid, will appear at the end of each 100-year period. The Mahdi will appear and reign as a caliph, and most likely in the year 93rd or a later of a specific future century preceding the coming of Isa by 7 years. There will follow a 7-year period during which time the Dajjal, Antichrist, will appear. Number four, Isa ibn Maryam will descend and defeat the Dajjal. Number five, after the conquest and destruction of Antichrist, Isa will live and reign over an Islamic kingdom, either 7 years or 40 years, and then will die. Austin. Interestingly, Mujaddid, for most of the centuries, it has been very, there has been a consensus on who's Mujaddid. So, but like in the recent centuries, people have debated a lot about who is and who is not. And it's on also primarily because of the sects within Muslims. Like, the Muslims divide into two major sects for the start, the Sunnis and the Shiites, and then they later on like also divide into other sects. So like different sects will have different mujaddids, especially in the newer times. So this was the chronology that Suyuti has used, and it is very same as compared to the things we've already discussed above. But his ideation of 1,000 years never proved right. Let's see, because like when he's talking about 1,000 years, he's thinking somewhere around the Islamic calendar, and we are way past that. So this is primarily the gist of the Islamic eschatological literature. When you're reading Bible or when you're reading other literatures uh, within the Abrahamic tradition, it becomes very evident that the end times, especially for the Islamic eschatology, is very dystopian, is full of wars, is full of fitna, as they would call, and trial for Muslims. Uh, Now we move on towards the second ideation, which is the new fears. And this is the project I have been developing for now. This is what I call secular eschatologies or secular apocalypses, because I feel like they can be felt and empirically observed. Uh, and I focus on the word empirical evidence, something that has developed a lot after enlightenment, because people are like, we want to see everything, we want to witness everything, we want to touch everything, and if it it is empirical, then we can believe on that. So the secular apocalypses are very empirical in nature because you just can see them. Ecology, you can witness it. Nuclear apocalypses, you can just see, these are the things that are happening. People died because of this, and it is very imminent threat. And then obviously, uh, technology. So the term that has been primarily used for apocalypse is the singularity. And this is the term I'm introducing here. And the singularity is a hypothetical a moment when machine intelligence surpasses human cognition and triggers an irreversible transformation of civilization. Uh, Something you'll understand later on too. So, how the singularity unfolds, this is important, and how it could unfold in the present era. So, for now, it's not a one event, but it is a chain of different events that are going to happen. And some of the scholars have divided it into three different parts. The first one is AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, the era which we are living on. It matches a human at any intellectual task, reasoning, learning, and problem solving across every different domain. So most of the scholars would say we are living in an age of artificial general intelligence. Uh, the second one is ASI, or artificial superintelligence, turns that human level mind on itself, redesigning its own software and hardware to surpass any human. Uh, this is what they say we are moving towards. And the third is the feedback loop, which is that that primarily the machine, each smarter version improves itself faster. The cycles shorten, intelligence rockets past the human horizon. So it's primarily the same process going on and on again, which is the machines improving themselves at a faster rate, and then surpassing humans at large. I've taken up a very interesting philosophical uh, game over here, and this is something that was developed by Alan Turing in 1950s, and it's called the Turing test. So the Turing test goes as follows: there is an interrogator, which is a, a C, and there is a screen in between the interrogator, and there are two things: there's a machine and there is a human. So this is what Turing would say. Would say that the machine and the humans are going to test the interrogator to see if the interrogator knows which is the machine and which is the human. And if the interrogator is like, yes, I know, you are the machine, and yes, I know, you are the human. He's like, right, and definitely machines are not up to par with the humans, because the humans have rightly identified who's a machine and who's a human. But what if the interrogators like questioning both of them at the same time and continues to question them and fails to understand what's a machine and what's a human? So what happens then? So definitely for like Alan Turing, that would be a main important point of how we would surpass that point. And if it happens, then the humans would be unable to distinguish between machines and humans. And this is called the imitation game. Are we there yet? I'm not sure, but we are definitely going close and close. The more times you call to different operators, most of the times these are not the operators who are speaking to you. They're definitely the different machines who are like, okay, please select option A, please go for option B, please select option C. And then you're like, okay, I want to talk to a real human. And then, but it would just not let you to speak to the real human. And it has happened to me a lot of times. So, like, this is something they have been developing over time. They want to let you as a human speak to a machine, but at the same time you feel like you're talking to a human. uh, I have taken up two different philosophers up, and this was from 1950s, by the way, Alan Turing, and this is something that philosophers have discussed a lot. Number one, why intelligence would mean domination. And like, to speed up, I have taken Stephen Hawking, who's a very well-known scientist and physicist. Uh, and this is what he says: it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded. So, the same process. The machines are improving themselves at an ever increasing rates. The humans are slow and would be left behind. And this is the video. I do not know if you have the sound for you, but you could definitely search up Stephen Hawking and artificial intelligence, and this is what he's going to say to you. The exact quotation, I've quoted him. Now, this is important. The technologists who are developing this AI have been using a lot of theological language at times. So, for example, Musk was a very well known figure and has been developing Grok, has control over Twitter, a lot of influence in USA, says that we have already entered singularity, declaring that this year AI becomes smarter than humans and everything changes forever. Uh, and likewise, different Nobel Prize winners have different sayings. For example, one would say, I think religion will be in trouble if we create other beings. Once we start creating beings that can think for themselves and do things for themselves, maybe even have bodies if they are robots, we may start realizing we are less special than we thought. And the idea that we are very special and we were made in the image of God, that idea may go out of window. And this becomes very relevant within Islamic eschatological literature too, because like Muslims have been told that you are the Khalifa of the God, and therefore you control everything rather than everything controlling you. An interesting example would be humans controlling elephants. So like the elephants are way larger, but you're just like, no, like you cannot supersede us, we control you. So it's not the size, it's definitely not how much they are like impressive in 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 their capacities of power, but definitely whether we as humans control them. And for now, we do. Oh, my apologies. How much time do we have? I'm not keep...
Normally 45 minutes, so you've had half an hour, 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I hope so. I'm going right with the time. So talking about this, like, it's an increasing fear that the technologists have been developing AI in the image of the God, because like, what do you need of God? You're like, I want to ask questions, please answer me. I want something, please give it to me. I want healing, please give it to me. You know, all those things that we normally envision something from God. And this is something like even Mark Zuckerberg stated. So he was like, I'm very, very fearful that the way AI has been developing over time is within the image of the God itself. Uh, and then like interestingly, if you may think, they have been embedding all these AI into different machines. So for example, if you have been across different Waymos or robo taxis, they can drive by themselves, they can auto drive. That's a machine embedded with AI. And then you have robots embedded with AI taking decisions on their own at the very moment. uh, the benevolent superintelligence problem. Okay, this is one of the research papers I've written. It's still unpublished, but I'll let you know about some of the things that I discuss over there. I have taken a philosopher. He's called Philip Pettit, and his theory of republicanism. So the liberal view or the prevalent view at this time is that freedom is non-interference. How am I free at this time? Because like I can easily get up, leave this room, maybe face some consequences, but at the same time I'm like free. Ah, so you're free so long as no one actually interferes with your choices. That's the modern liberal view. So, like, you're no longer a slave. You can choose your own career. You can choose to a different university you want to go to. Maybe leave that degree on a very point. Uh, you can choose to eat what you want, all those things. So, like, you feel like that's a normal human being and he's like free. But Patin's view is very different from from the liberal view that we have now. He would say and take up freedom as non-domination. And this is what he says. You are unfree if another merely holds the capacity to interfere arbitrarily, whether or not they ever do. So, for example, he has taken up this interesting definition of a master and a slave. He would say your master's benevolent. He's like the greatest master you can have. He's like giving you all the fruits you want. You want berries, he'll give you berries. You're like, I want a steak tonight, he'll give you steak tonight. You know, all those things. He's a great master. He's given you a great bedroom too. Uh, but at the same time, you feel like he could interfere with your life because you feel dominated by him. You're like, I am a good person, but I'm still being dominated by him. So for Petitet, humans can only be free, entirely free, if they are in a, a non-domination form. Very debatable though, because people would say the humans sometimes need domination. For example, parents and children, an interesting dichotomy, and parents are at times dominating teachers and students. Teachers are dominating at times. They want to, tell you, please do not. I feel like you have to stop now, or things like that. But for him, at that very moment, the student or the child is not in a total freedom. So I've taken up his theory of republicanism, and I've stated that despite the fact that we as humans might feel free in this world of AI, we would technically not be totally free or in a phase of freedom. And there are three primary pillars of human agency. The first one is the meaningful choice that I have taken, whereby we deliberate, we revision, we learn from different processes and the mistakes we make. Number two is the free will, because we've got this autonomy to choose. And when we're choosing that, we are making conscious deliberations. And number three, the idea of creativity, because we as humans have evolved like this. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and then through different struggles and lived experiences, we're like, yeah, this is something we do not do, and this is something we go for. I believe, and this is my thesis, that at the end of the day, the more we continue to use artificial intelligence, the more we lose all of these three things. The idea of a meaningful choice, because we humans would be like, we have to go back towards the machines. Let me go back, let me write, let me confirm. Free will, where does it go? And creativity lost forever because we are like, okay, I've written this, please refine it for me. How do I make it better? All those different queries the students employ recently, and they've been employing that a lot. Uh, so creativity is one of the major pillars up people are fearful about, and definitely the free will. So in all those instances, if I would say, if I would take a Freudian idea that we as humans do not make conscious decisions, but at the end of the day, we are ruled by the subconscious, the humans would be subconsciously referring back to artificial intelligence most of the times. So will we be free, or will we have freedom? A question to deliberate upon. And interestingly, in recent times, the way the AI has been used in warfare, I've taken up three things. Israel has used a lot of AI to target thousands in Gaza. And this is New York Times posting. The Independent posting on the new way of war in Middle East. The Washington Post posting on Pentagon strikes AI deals with military and technologists. You already know about two important events that have recently happened. The one, which is the very infamous one, the picking of Maduro. Uh, what a world we live in, that despite the fact that you are a president of a country, you could be picked up by another president of a more powerful country. So now the presidents are like, seriously, are we even free? Uh, and it was not primarily the military which picked it up. So it was the AI, the Claude, which students have been using lately a lot. Uh, and so Claude is in direct alliance, was in fact in the direct alliance with the US military. And this is how it went on. Human source, which is like CIA insider or someone from the intelligence community, he's there. Then there are signals, definitely you geolocate someone. And then there is imagery which is coming on from the satellites. Then there are stealth drones which could also pick up different images. But most importantly, despite all these things, you needed a lot of planning. If anyone recalls how Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan, where I come from, it was a lot of planning, and the Americans were very very unsure where he's living. But now, when you have all this data coming in live, which is like live imaging coming from all these stealth drones that are sending you feed, the AI develops what it calls a feedback loop sort of a thing, whereby it is trying to guess the right moment one should strike. So it's like just not guessing now, it's making a very very strategic decision based on the data that has been fed to it. And that is how they got Maduro, primarily because it was AI and all those images combining together. They got onto the right moment. They were like, and it was not the president, it was neither the military, it was the AI which decided what was the right moment to pick up Maduro, and they did. Secondly, the US Israel Iran war, primarily. The Washington Post, New York Times has written a lot about it. And even Pete Hegseth uh, agreed with it. That they have been using a lot of cloud recently. Washington Post, the most advanced AI the US has ever used in the war in Iran, which is that the AI is deciding most of the targets, uh, and then the missiles just say jam. NPR writes, America's first AI-fueled war is unfolding right now in Iran, and the Iran war shows the creeping use of AI in warfare. And this is one of the reasons that the way the cloud has been used within the US military system, the cloud had to then go back because then the Americans were like, we need the same amount of surveillance for the American citizens because they want to know your patterns. And this is something the Chinese have been employing lately too. So the Chinese, you've got every camera, the Chinese would see you, and you're just passing by. They know your every movement. Looks like a 1984 George Orwellian novel. Uh, but at the same time, the Americans wanted this, and there was a big conflict between all these companies, and the cloud backtracked. But then the OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, came in. So, last two ideas. So, how would the world look like when the machines decide who to kill, who to keep, who to capture, who to arrest? This is an important debate because, like, lethal autonomous weapons then take up all this AI and are deciding most of the things on their own selves. And CNN has been writing a lot on the rise of the killer robots and why we must stop them because this is the idea of the military industrial complex has been developing, which is like we no longer need humans. These are the robots that go in the battlefield. The humans are just sitting behind, planning things, maybe deciding the bigger actions, but on the field, the robots decide what to kill, what not to kill. Um, and this is something they're pushing forward for. Uh, in a capitalist world, it's highly probable the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans competing together on who develops this technology first. Very, very probable, projected throughout popular culture. You have seen Avengers, you have seen different movies, different seasons. Everywhere, these are the machines or people with different machines deciding different things. Dystopian idea of the world. And yeah, lastly, then all these wars are also projected as the God's work. So Pete Hegseth was like, this is the crusade that we have launched on Iran using machines and AI, something you do not get in uh, the apocalyptic classical literature. The crusades were meant, or the Armageddon, or the wars that the Islamic literature also calls upon, were meant to be fought using swords, spears, all those things. And I feel like this is also a point where we can metaphorically debate on what the literature says and what it could be. My last idea, I feel like when you are reading Islamic eschatological literature, there is a lot of space for tawil because there are a lot of uh, mutashabihat, which is like something very, very unclear. People have different reasonings for that. And I feel like Tawil becomes really important. So, what is Tawil? Tawil is the returning a text from its outer sense to its inner meaning, which is Zahir. So, Muslim theologians have done so for a long time now. So, they're like, most this is metaphorical, this is not, this has to be taken in literal meaning. So they'll definitely not say about Jesus, yeah, Jesus has to come in in literal meanings. uh, uh, the antichrist has to come in literal meaning. But for example, the example I've taken up, the Dajjal on a donkey, now this may look funny for now, but it is definitely not, because in older times donkeys, horses, camels were used primarily for transport. And it has been stated within the literature that the Dajjal is going to travel on that. But is he going to travel on a donkey, or would it be a machine, or an airplane or something like that? Very highly debatable. So new scholars would take up a rational uh, tawil of that very literature and would say that we feel like uh, it could be different than what we have been reading on very, very literally. Uh, and lastly, mutashabihat, which is the scripture's figurative verses set against the clear muhkamat. So something I was talking about, that muhkamat, which is very, very clear for you. For example, you cannot say that prayer or the fasting or the Hajj is a is a mutashabih, is mushtabih, but rather you would say it's very, very literal, very, very muhkam. We have to take it that way. So it has to come from different sources, and then they combine together. For example, Quran, Hadith, then consensus combines together, all those things. But most of the apocalyptic or eschatological literature is coming from very weak sources at times, which is what we call daif hadith. Or sometimes it's also coming from the Christian literature within Islamic literature, because there are at times what I've called the liminal spaces, whereby when you are writing a story, and this is mostly for writers, they're like, okay, interestingly, we have a missing link. What do we do? There, the Christian and the Jewish literature comes in, and they fill up those spaces just for the sake of the story. Uh, so I feel like this is one of the things the Muslim scholars could work on, that in terms of the way the world is evolving now, how do they reconcile the classical literature with the changing realities that we face? And what happens of the bigger questions, for example, the idea of the freedom, the idea of the free will, the idea of we humans ruling the world and built in the image of the God. Lastly, I've taken up this framework of my professor, Dr. David Cook, and for him, apocalypse is primarily a moral message, and that is what it was meant for most of the religions. So, the moral apocalypse is the heart of the apocalyptic message. So, for Dr. Cook, the apocalypse aims to bring about a sweeping transformation of his society. And the moral apocalypse is the means by which that change comes upon. Because the religions tell the same story most of the times, which is you do not sin, you do the good things. Apocalypse would come eventually. You'll be judged, then you'll either go to heaven or hell. But for secular people, how does apocalypse works? It's if you do not believe in God, you're like, this is the world I live in. I have to make sure this world lives on, because if something happens to this world, what happens to my own identity? So I feel like this is something that theologians and people of religion could work on, the empirical ideation of apocalypse and things that matter most for most of the people.